camera opens on a stunning, aged painting of an Indian noblewoman, perhaps Khairun-Nissa, followed by a portrait of a British officer in 18th century attire, James Achilles Kirkpatrick. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. Today, we journey back in time to uncover a story of profound love, heartbreaking separation, and the unyielding forces of empire. This is the story of James Achilles Kirkpatrick, a British resident in Hyderabad, and the noblewoman who captured his heart, Khairun-Nissa. Their love story was a beautiful bridge between two cultures, but like many such bridges in history, it was destined to face the turbulent waters of politics and prejudice. Imagine Hyderabad at the turn of the 19th century, a vibrant city, a symphony of cultures where the powerful Nizam ruled. Into this world stepped James Kirkpatrick. He wasn't just another British official. He was a man who fell deeply in love with India. He adopted local customs, learned the languages, and in doing so, he met her, Khairun-Nissa, the most excellent among women. She was the granddaughter of the Nizam's prime minister, a young woman of grace, intelligence, and spirit. Their connection was immediate and powerful, defying the strict social codes of both their societies. Their love was so strong that James, against all odds, converted to Islam, married Khairun-Nissa in a grand ceremony, and built a magnificent residency where their two worlds could merge. He was known as Hashmat Jang, glorious in battle, and she was the beloved Begum. They had two children, a son named Sahib Alam and a daughter named Sahib Begum. For a few brief, shining years, they created their own paradise, a testament to a love that saw no borders. But the winds of change were blowing from the British Empire, and they were about to turn into a storm. The British authorities in Calcutta and London grew increasingly wary of officials like James, who had gone native. They saw his integration into Indian life not as a bridge, but as a betrayal of British superiority. Lord Wellesley, the Governor-General, was determined to impose a stricter, more distant form of colonial rule. James's marriage, his lifestyle, everything he had built, came under intense scrutiny. The paradise he and Khairun-Nissa had created was now seen as a political liability. The whispers against him grew louder, the pressure mounted, and finally, the inevitable order came. The official dispatch arrived like a death warrant for their happiness. James was ordered to be reassigned. He was to travel to Calcutta to explain himself, and more devastatingly, he was commanded to send his children to England for a proper British education. The order was a thinly veiled attempt to sever his ties with India, to tear his family apart, and to erase the beautiful life he had built with Khairun-Nissa. The news struck their home like a thunderbolt, shattering the peace and love that had filled its halls. For James and Khairun-Nissa, the world they knew was about to end. The day of departure was shrouded in a heavy, suffocating sadness. The grand Hyderabad palace, once a symbol of their union, became the stage for their tragic farewell. Servants moved about in hushed silence, their faces reflecting the sorrow that hung in the air. Khairun-Nissa, dressed in her finest silks, stood with a composure that belied the storm raging within her heart. She was a woman of immense strength, a noblewoman who had been taught to mask her emotions. But on this day, her composure was a fragile veil. As James approached her, the facade began to crumble. Her eyes, which had so often sparkled with love and laughter, were now pools of unshed tears. He held her hands, his own heart breaking with every beat. What words can be said in such a moment? How do you say goodbye to the other half of your soul, knowing you may never see them again? The air was thick with unspoken promises and desperate hopes. He tried to reassure her, promising he would return, that their separation would be temporary. But both of them felt the cold grip of a finality they dared not name. As James embraced his children, little Sahib Alam and Sahib Begum, too young to fully comprehend the tragedy unfolding, Khairun-Nissa's strength finally gave way. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, then another and another. They were silent tears, flowing from a well of grief so deep it had no sound. She watched as her husband, the love of her life, and her precious children prepared to leave her. She was being stripped of everything she held dear, not by fate, but by the cold, calculated decree of a distant empire. Her silent tears were a testament not to weakness, but to a love so powerful that its severing was an agony beyond words. The children, confused and scared, clung to their father. They were leaving the only home they had ever known, leaving the warmth of their mother's embrace for a cold, unknown land across the sea. Khairun-Nissa's heart ached as she looked at them. What would become of them? Would they remember her? Would they remember their language, their culture, the land of their birth? Their future was a terrifying, uncertain void. She was a mother being forced to let go of her children, entrusting them to a world that would see them not as the beloved prince and princess of Hyderabad, but as curiosities, half-caste children of a disgraced official. This was perhaps the cruelest cut of all. James departed for Calcutta, leaving a void in Hyderabad that could never be filled. He wrote to Khairun-Nissa constantly, pouring his heart out onto paper. He wrote of his love, his longing, his desperate fight to be reunited with her. He promised to clear his name and return to their home, to the life they had built together. These letters were his lifeline, his only way to connect with the woman who was his entire world. But a cruel fate was at play. It's believed that these letters, filled with such passion and hope, were intercepted. They never reached her. Imagine Khairun-Nissa waiting day after day in the silent halls of their home, scanning the horizon for a messenger who never came. She was left in a tortuous silence, a silence that could only be interpreted as abandonment. Did he forget her? Did his love fade once he was back among his own people? The silence was a poison, slowly eroding her hope. She was left alone, a ghost in her own home, haunted by memories and the deafening absence of the man she loved. She never knew of his unwavering devotion, his desperate attempts to reach her. She was left to believe she had been forgotten. James's health, already fragile, deteriorated rapidly in the humid climate of Calcutta. Perhaps it was the illness, or perhaps it was a broken heart. In October 1805, just a few months after leaving Hyderabad, James Achilles Kirkpatrick died. He died alone, far from his wife and his home, his final wish to be reunited with his family unfulfilled. The news of his death would eventually reach Hyderabad, delivering the final, devastating blow to Khairun-Nissa. Her love had been tested by distance, by prejudice, and by the machinations of an empire, and in the end, it was tragically cut short by death. Khairun-Nissa lived on for another 8 years, a life shadowed by grief. She died at the young age of 27. Their children, raised in England by James's family, grew up with little to no memory of their mother or their Indian heritage. Their names were anglicized to William George and Catherine Aurora. The vibrant bridge their parents had built between two cultures was dismantled, and their story was largely forgotten, a footnote in the grand, often ruthless, narrative of the British Empire. But love stories like this, no matter how tragic, have a way of surviving. They remind us that beneath the grand sweep of history, there are individual hearts that love, hope, and break. The story of James and Khairun-Nissa is a powerful, poignant reminder of a time when love dared to cross boundaries, and the heartbreaking price it often had to pay. It's a story that deserves to be remembered. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If this story moved you, please give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you don't miss our next exploration into the forgotten corners of history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.